Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Too Many Guys Soccer Show, Other League Short. Today's an exciting day here on the Short. We've been covering the second and third tier of Englishmen's football here on the show for over a year, but today we expand to cover the FA Women's Super League, the top tier of English women's soccer, and one of the best soccer leagues in the world, if I do say so myself, with some of the top women's players from around the globe. Today we'll preview the WSL season as it starts this Saturday and Sunday, the 10th and 11th, and there's a great deal more excitement this year following the English women's triumphant performance in the Euro tournament this summer. So here we go. Here's what you can expect in this year's Women's Super League. Now, if you haven't been watching the league in prior years, I'll go over the basics with you. The league is comprised of 12 teams, many of whom have Premier League men's counterparts. However, the men's and women's games operate independently, so a team like Reading can be in the WSL while their male counterparts are in the championship. Speaking of the championship, there is a women's championship with relegation and promotion. But only the bottom team leaves in the WSL and only the top championship team comes up. The teams will play each other twice, so that'll give you a total of 22 league matches. But the English women's teams also play in a League Cup, an FA Cup, and the top three teams make the Champions League. The format for Women's Champions League is a little bit different. I will explain how that works when we do a Women's Champions League preview when we get to the group stages. Beyond that, it's pretty much like every other football league in the world. You get 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw, none for a loss. Most points win the league, and the 3-time defending league champions are Chelsea, led by legendary coach Emma Hayes, who did TV in the Euros this year. Last year, Birmingham were relegated. So who replaced Birmingham in the WSL? Well, it might sound a little bit strange to hear if you're a fan of the men's game, but last year's Women's Championship winners were, in fact, Liverpool Football Club. That's right, the Reds ladies were the class of the championship last year, winning by a lot. And this year they returned to the WSL after 2 years down in their championship. So who might you know on their team? Well, returning from Wolfsburg, you have Shanice van de Sanden. She's a Dutch international. She's got a lot of national team and Champions League experience. But she wasn't selected for the Dutch team this summer, and she struggled at Wolfsburg last year, though she is very familiar with the Liverpool Football Club. The other big signing, Emily Koivisto, played defense for her native Finland in the Euros, as well as Rachel Furness, a Northern Irish woman. Who should you know? Their goalkeeper, Rachel Laws. She was their player of the year last year, and she is going to be essential this year as the club returns to the WSL. I would expect the Red Ladies to struggle against some of the bigger title contenders, but with a parent club as big as successful as they are, they will probably be interested in them staying up. Can't see them getting relegated again. However, it is their first season back in the top flight. Didn't really make any world-class moves this year, so I think bottom half is what they can expect. Next up, we have last year's 11th place side, Leicester City. Who plays for Leicester that you might know? Well, not a lot of people, unfortunately. Their major addition this offseason was picking up Welsh international Kerry Jones on a loan from Man U. She scored her first goal for her country this year in World Cup qualifying. And they also got Nigerian international Ashley Plumtree. So there isn't a lot of star power in the side. So what should you be watching for out of Leicester? Unfortunately, I feel this is going to be one of the teams that are relegation contenders. They had the worst goal differential in the WSL last year. And so to stay up, they're going to need a lot more offensive productions, but they're taking on some truly star-powered teams. So with the Leicester men struggling, could we see both Leicester teams returning to the championship? I mean, that might be an interesting to put some money on. If you're into that sort of thing, should get some good odds. Sorry, I'm not a gambler, so I don't know. Anyway, moving back to Merseyside, let's talk about the blue part of Liverpool and Everton Football Club. Everton finished 10th in the WSL last year, and they were projected to do much better. But with Liverpool returning, well, they don't want to cede anything to their city rivals. So with that in mind, this summer, they made 8 signings, including bringing in a number of younger players on loan from other WSL sides. Everton are loaded with national team players like the Danish defensive pairing of Kartine Vea and Rika Sevica, alongside Swedish starter Natalie Born and game winner against Switzerland Hannah Benenson. So while you might not recognize Everton from the English ladies teams, they do have a bunch of bona fide internationals all over the pitch. Everton need to score more if they're going to move up the table this year. They only netted 18 times in 22 games last year. They'll be looking to improve and quite possibly have done so, bringing in Jess Park from City. I see them improving this year, but how much is still an open question. The top half of this table is packed, but I do feel like Everton have been making some good steps in the right direction, and anywhere up the table is a win for them. All right, let's stay in the northwest, but move to England's second largest city as we take a look at the Aston Villa Women's Football Club, who finished 9th last year in the WSL. Villa bring in Lioness Rachel Daly to their side, stolen from Houston Dash here in America. She's one of 6 moves the Villains have made to improve in their 3rd season in the top flight. But Villa are another side that needs offense. Last year, they only scored 13 goals, and that was the fewest in the entire WSL. They brought in French international Kenza Dali to assist with that. But Dali was on Everton last year, and as I just mentioned, they didn't exactly set the world on fire with goals. And neither did she. She had none. I'd like to think they're going to continue to improve, especially bringing Daly into the mix. But I think if they're not in the relegation conversation, that would be a win for them this year. All right, now to the home of the one side that doesn't have a men's counterpart in the Premier League, Berkshire's own Reading FC. Honestly, that might not be true for too long, as Reading have looked pretty good in the championship this year. But the Reading women are coming from a better starting point than the teams we've already spoken about. They netted nearly a goal last game, and they bolstered the side with a number of signings aimed at improving their defense, including American Brooke Hendricks. One does wonder if it's enough. Their leading scorer last year, Natasha Dowie, is 33, though she's a Canadian national and Florida alum. Now, Deanna Rose is only 23 and netted 4 last year. But when you think about the other teams below them, the resources they have at their disposal, and that they have invested this year, you wouldn't be horribly off base if you thought this team might have relegation written all over them. I mean, maybe, but we'll see what they can do. I love, though, as an aside, I love Reading's blue hoops on their jerseys, and I would love to see them back in the top level next year in both the men's and the women's games. All right, as we move up now, we'll begin to look at some of the teams who have Champions League on their mind. Rounding out the bottom half of last year's table, we flocked to the South Coast and the women of Brighton and Hove Albion. Get it? Flock? Because they're the Seagulls? Huh? Yeah? All right. Well, Brighton finished seventh in the league last year, and they likewise appear committed to bolstering their defense, bringing back the experienced Rebecca Stott after a time away, as well as bringing over Chelsea youngster Georgia Fox, who impressed last year on a season loan. Additionally, the Seagulls look to get better offensively despite losing two of their top three scorers. Adding Beatrice Isari and Norwegian national team player Elizabeth Turland. You have to ask, though, is it enough? Fox replaces another English young prospect at D, Maya Letitia, who's gone to Man U permanently. If you watch the main program, you know I usually give the Brighton men stick for their unconvincing, draw-heavy style of play. But I give them credit. They stay. And shouldn't it be the same for their women's club? I could see them regressing down the table a little bit here, but will it be enough to finish last in the league? Time will tell, but I have to say it probably would not shock many if that happened. All right, we move now to the top half of last year's table, and barring massive improvements from Everton, or a large surprise from Liverpool as a newly promoted side, or massive surprises from some of these new recruits on the other teams, you'd have to think it will be these teams who will be fighting for the 3 Champions League positions on offer this year. You know, I don't know, I've gotten, 11 minutes, 12 minutes into this, and I've tried to mention some of the players you might have become familiar with at the summer's Euro. But now as we go forward, you're going to start to recognize more and more names. So let's shift our focus now to West Ham, who came in 6th last season. They are not exactly loaded with the Lionesses who dazzled English hearts over the summer, but Iceland number 10, Dagny, Brynjar's daughter, returns this year for the Hammers. Add to that Vivian Asai, who comes from Bayern Munich, who scored 12 goals over there in 2 seasons and has a Champions League pedigree, along with national team experience. Although, of course, she's from France, and the French are loaded with Delphine Cascarino, Marie Antoinette Katoto, Didiato Diani. Asai was not on your screens in the Euro, but she was a nice addition for West Ham. It's a little hard for them to see West Ham being much worse than they were last year. Their additions this summer, in my estimation, outpaced the players they've lost because they've made a number of other moves as well. But it's also still kind of hard to see them making it into the top 3. Another team looking to close the gaps with the European spots is Tottenham. Tottenham came in 5th last season, and while they're not exactly loaded with Euro 22 stars, they have brought in a number of young forwards who are on track to be national team players as a bolster to their attack. First among them is their new number 9, Polish international Nikola Karszewska, who's netted 7 goals in this year's World Cup qualifications, as well as Norwegian Celine Bizet Ildhusoy and young English striker Ellie Brazil. It'll be interesting to see their philosophy with those young players. They did lose their top scorer last year, Rachel Williams, who's in her mid-30s. She moved on to Manchester United, but they have got talent. Personally, a bit more impressed with the moves that West Ham have made short-term, though I think Spurs are looking to the future. Still, with the talent of the teams in the top 4, West Ham's moves, I could see maybe a little slide this year for Spurs, though it really wouldn't shock me to see them hold at 5th, just below these clubs we're about to talk about. So when I sat down to put this together, I started with a format that I'd introduce the teams by highlighting the players who you may know from 2020 Euro and add in some players who you should pay attention to who weren't in the Euros, and then talk about how that translates against the rest of the field. Well, in getting through this, I might have stretched because maybe you weren't watching the Iceland games. But as we get into the top four, we're going to stop stretching. In the top four, there's kind of a bright line, a certain higher echelon. You're going to know a lot of these women, and it's going to be hard for me to see any of them not finishing in the top four again this year. So talking about the fourth place team, last year in the WSL, that was Manchester United. And so who's on this team who you might have heard of? Well, I don't know. Do you know Mary Earps? Here's a hint. She's England's starting keeper. And if my keeper kit's hanging back there, if you don't know the name, that's probably a good thing. Nobody knows her names. But however, she's probably the best keeper in the WSL, allowing only 1 goal last year per 90 minutes. Last year playing every single minute of every game. And maybe you've heard of Alessia Russo. She was only the breakout star of Euro 22, England's super sub and goal-scoring hero. She's joined at Man U by young Ella Toone. She is scoring in the final fame, along with new recruit and lioness Nikita Paris. But who's on the team who you might not have heard of but could be impactful? Well, Lucia Garcia, who's only 24, was on Spain's bench in the big matches in the Euros. But at Bilbao, she's already scored 63 goals and tallied one against Finland in the Euro. Additionally, as I mentioned before, England did bring in 20-year-old Maya Tessier, and she's shown a lot of promise. I like the moves that Man U has made here. They only finished 5 points off the European places last year, and I think they're well positioned to make a run here. Not bad for a team that's only 5 years old. All right, moving from red Manchester to the sky blue side. Last year's third place side and Champions League spot claimer Manchester City. Though they're already out of that. Yes, out of the Champions League. I'll get to it one day. City have for many years been the second best side in the WSL, slightly slipping last year. But for a long time, they did challenge for the title, and they finished strong. However, if I'm going to talk about who the players who you know, I have to talk about the players who you know who they've lost. Most notably, English legend Ellen White retired. Little tribute here, Ellen White scored 58 goals for England and Great Britain, so all the best to you, Ellen. Meanwhile, City, though, also lost England national team stars Lucy Bronze and Kara Walsh to Barcelona, as well as Euro hero Georgia Stanway to Bayern. That, my friends, that is a lot of talent to lose. They have retained the services of Lauren Hemp, who was also excellent for England this summer, still only 22. Already their top scorer last year, as well as Chloe Kelly, Alex Greenwood, and Swedish star Philippa Engeldahl. So if your only exposure to women's soccer was Euro 22, you know a good deal about City. But their second leading scorer last year, Bunny Shaw, is a Jamaican international. And she's still with the team. Also, City this year added young Australian Mary Fowler. She's only 19. She could break out here or maybe even in next year's World Cup in her home country. But so look out, Citizens. You've had a good run. But it's hard to see losing the likes of Bronze and White and being the same team. Is this the year that Man U eclipses City? I really like Man U's moves. Just going to leave that there with a grin. All right, so last year's WSL was decided by just one. And the team who came only a single point from glory were the ladies of Arsenal. Arsenal, who have, Golden Ball and Golden Boot winner Beth Mead out there. But if you want to talk about what a loaded front line they have, in addition to Mead, they have Swedish star Stina Blackstenius, who has put up 20 goals in a league season before. And this summer, they added Sweden's second striker in Lida Hurtig and kept 23-year-old Norwegian Euro goal scorer Frida Manum and English women's captain Leah Williamson on D. But who, again, if you never watched women's soccer at all except for Euro 22, who is the name you need to know? Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Vivianne Miedema. She got COVID during the Euro, and even though she gutted out 120 minutes against France, she clearly wasn't herself, because for Viv Miedema, herself is the top scorer in the history of the Women's Super League. She is also the top scorer, men's or women's, for the Netherlands ever. And she's also the face of Adidas ads with Rick and Morty and Mo Salah. Absolute weapon. And the best just get better. I mean, does this team have what it takes to get to the top, to be number one? I really think they do. Arsenal are so loaded that Miedema, who I say again is the top WSL scorer of all time, has settled into playing a number 10 role. That's ridiculous. Arsenal are really, really good. But if you want to be the best, you've got to beat the best. And the best team in the Women's Super League, and maybe in the entire world, is Chelsea FC. And I know, I know I'm biased, but you might know some of the players that they have on their side from England, like Beth England, the aptly named striker, last year's second leading scorer on the team. And then you might have heard of Fran Kirby, the midfield master who was everywhere on the pitch this summer for England. And their defense, like England, is led by their anchor Millie Bright, who I happen to own an autograph of and should have gotten out. But she also loves to show up with her head and score goals when the team needs it most. And it's not just England stars. There's 2018 and 2022 UEFA Women's Player of the Year Pernilla Harder, who has all of 70 goals for Denmark. And this summer, they added French game winner Ave Paraset, who plays wingback and mid. And, well, even though she wasn't in the Euro, they also added another defender in Canadian Kadesha Buchanan. But if you only ever watched the Euro and nothing else, then you've not seen the best women's player in the world. And her name is Sam Kerr, and she plays for Chelsea. Kerr scored 20 in 22 last year. Sam Kerr always scores goals. She's far and away the best striker in all of Chelsea, men's or women's. She's led the league in goals the last 2 years, and she is a dynamo. Additionally, Chelsea have future stars like Niamh Charles, Jess Carter, and Lauren James, sister to Reece, who is sadly at this moment the best men's striker at Chelsea, and he plays D. The Chelsea women do not have holes. They don't lose much at all. Last year, they pulled off the double, winning the FA Cup and the league, and they just keep getting better. So at the end of the day, I think most people would be shocked if Chelsea didn't win again, but realistically, I do think that Man U, Arsenal, and City all have shots. I'm not going to make any table predictions here. I just kind of wanted to share my love of the WSL with you and hope that after watching the Euros this summer, you're just as pumped to support your ladies' team as you are the boys. And if you don't have your men's team doesn't have a counterpart in the WSL, you could always support Reading. And you know what? It's pretty easy to watch anymore. Paramount Plus, who already has the Men's Champions League, so I know you already pay for it, became the WSL broadcaster here in the States this year, and they've got two very intriguing matchups on this Sunday, the 11th. Now, at 7:20 a.m. Eastern, you have West Ham going to Stamford Bridge and taking on Chelsea live. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Sam Kerr will score a goal. In fact, again, I don't bet, but if I did, Chelsea win parlay with a Kerr goal. Pretty good. 1:50 p.m. Eastern over on Paramount Plus. Huge game as Arsenal take on Manchester City. We'll know really quickly where City is at this season. Well, I hope I've thoroughly covered this for you. Really went longer than I'd expected. Probably took a little bit too much time drooling over the way Sam Kerr scores goals, but I could have gone on for another hour doting on Fran Kirby. But anyway, for the Too Many Guys Soccer Show, this is Mike Shustak, trying to do what I can, but as always, we'll try to do better next time.